In this episode, we turn to a subject that sits quietly underneath almost everything modern organizations do, even though many beginners do not notice it at first when studying for the Certified Information Systems Auditor (CISA) exam. Data governance is about making sure information is defined clearly, owned appropriately, used responsibly, protected in sensible ways, and managed as an enterprise asset rather than as a random byproduct of daily work. For someone new to cybersecurity or audit thinking, that may sound abstract, but the basic idea is very practical. Organizations make decisions, serve customers, pay employees, measure performance, report results, and manage risk using data every day. If that data is inaccurate, inconsistent, poorly controlled, or misunderstood, then the organization can make bad decisions even when its people are hardworking and its systems appear to function normally. That is why data governance belongs in Domain 2. It helps explain how management creates order, accountability, and trust around one of the most important resources the enterprise has. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is to define data governance in plain language. Data governance is the framework of leadership, rules, roles, processes, and oversight used to make sure data is managed in a consistent and reliable way across the organization. It is not just about databases, reports, or analytics tools. It is about who decides what a data element means, who is allowed to use it, how its quality is maintained, how long it should be kept, and what controls apply when it moves between systems or outside the enterprise. A beginner may be tempted to think of data as something that simply exists once a system stores it, but governance reminds us that data has meaning only when the organization understands and manages it properly. Auditors care about this because weak data governance can undermine operations, reporting, compliance, privacy, and security all at once. Strong governance makes information more trustworthy, more usable, and easier to control in ways that support the enterprise rather than confuse it. One of the easiest ways to understand the importance of data governance is to picture what happens when it is missing. Different departments may use the same customer name field in different ways, store duplicate records with conflicting details, apply different retention periods, or calculate the same business metric using slightly different definitions. At first, those inconsistencies may seem small, but over time, they create significant confusion. Leaders receive reports that do not match each other. Employees spend hours debating which system contains the correct value, and customers may experience errors because one part of the organization knows something another part does not. This is not just inefficient. It becomes a control problem because the enterprise can no longer show that it understands its own information well enough to manage it responsibly. Data governance matters because it reduces that confusion by creating shared definitions, shared accountability, and shared expectations. When those are missing, the organization ends up arguing about information rather than using information to make better decisions. It is also important to separate data governance from data management because the terms are related but not identical. Data governance is the higher-level system of direction and oversight that defines expectations, ownership, and decision rights. Data management is the practical work of collecting, storing, moving, integrating, protecting, and maintaining data through technology and operational processes. A simple way to remember the distinction is that governance decides the rules and management carries them out in practice. If the organization says certain customer records must be accurate, retained only for an approved period, and shared only with authorized parties, that is governance direction. The actual technical and operational work required to enforce those expectations belongs more to data management. This distinction matters for the CISA exam because many questions test whether you can identify whether the issue is a policy and oversight problem or an execution problem. Strong organizations need both, but governance comes first because it tells everyone what the enterprise expects from its data. Ownership is one of the most important fundamentals in a data governance program because data problems often persist when nobody clearly owns the meaning, quality, and approved use of important information. A system administrator may maintain the platform, and a reporting team may build dashboards, but that does not automatically mean either one owns the business definition or acceptable use of the underlying data. Effective governance assigns clear responsibility to the people or functions best positioned to understand the purpose and business impact of the information. That responsibility often includes defining terms, approving changes, resolving conflicts, and deciding who may access or share the data. Without that clarity, organizations drift into a situation where many people touch the data, but no one is truly accountable for its reliability or control. Auditors pay close attention to ownership because unresolved data issues often survive for years when responsibility remains vague. Clear ownership supports quality, protection, escalation, and more consistent decision-making across the enterprise. Closely connected to ownership is the idea of data stewardship, which helps turn broad responsibility into ongoing care. A data owner may hold authority over major decisions, but day-to-day stewardship often involves helping maintain definitions, reviewing quality issues, supporting compliance with governance rules, and coordinating among teams that create or use the data. For a beginner, stewardship is easier to understand if you think of it as the practical care and attention needed to keep a valuable resource useful and trustworthy over time. Many organizations discover that assigning ownership alone is not enough, because someone also needs to watch how the data behaves in real processes, reports, interfaces, and system changes. A governance program becomes much stronger when stewardship is recognized as an actual responsibility rather than an informal courtesy performed only when time allows. From an audit perspective, stewardship helps show that governance is active and operational instead of existing only in policy documents and organization charts. Data quality is another major building block because governance has little value if the information cannot be trusted for the purposes the organization expects it to support. Quality does not mean perfection in every field at every moment. It means the data is sufficiently accurate, complete, timely, consistent, and relevant for the decisions and operations that depend on it. What counts as acceptable quality may vary by context, because the standard for a mailing list may not be the same as the standard for financial reporting or patient care. The governance program helps define those expectations and clarifies who is responsible when quality falls short. This matters because poor data quality can lead to billing errors, bad forecasting, flawed audit evidence, weak risk decisions, and loss of confidence in management reporting. Auditors examine whether the organization recognizes which data sets are especially important, how quality is monitored, and whether there is a structured process for addressing recurring issues rather than simply working around them every time they appear. Another fundamental is the need for common definitions and shared understanding across the enterprise. Organizations often assume everyone knows what a term means until they discover that different teams use the same word in very different ways. A simple metric such as active customer, terminated employee, critical system, or overdue payment can mean different things depending on who created the report and what logic was used. Those differences can create serious misunderstandings, especially when leaders rely on the resulting information for planning, compliance, budgeting, or risk decisions. Data governance helps by establishing approved business definitions and making them visible enough that systems, reports, and teams can use them consistently. This is one reason metadata matters, even for beginners who may not know the term well yet. Metadata is simply information about the data, such as definitions, sources, ownership, timing, and relationships. Good governance uses that context to reduce ambiguity. Auditors value this because unclear definitions often produce control problems that are not obvious until reports conflict or important decisions are challenged. Classification is also a fundamental part of a data governance program because not all data carries the same sensitivity, value, or risk. Some information is public or low impact, while other information may involve personal details, confidential business plans, legal records, payment data, or regulated content that deserves stricter handling. Governance helps the organization decide how data should be categorized so that protection, sharing, retention, and monitoring can be applied in sensible ways. Without classification, employees may either overprotect ordinary data and create inefficiency or underprotect sensitive data, and create serious exposure. For a beginner, classification is really about matching the level of care to the nature and importance of the information. It connects closely to privacy, security, and compliance because those obligations often depend on what kind of data is involved. Auditors examine classification because many other controls depend on it. If the enterprise does not understand what type of data it has, it becomes much harder to justify how that data is accessed, retained, transmitted, or safeguarded. The data lifecycle is another area that governance must address clearly. Data does not appear once and then sit quietly forever in one system. It is created or collected, used in processes, shared across applications, updated over time, retained for defined purposes, archived when appropriate, and eventually deleted or disposed of. Each stage raises management questions about accuracy, access, timing, ownership, and control. For example, information that was necessary during a transaction may not need to remain in active systems indefinitely, especially if extended retention increases privacy risk, storage cost, or legal exposure. A governance program helps define these expectations so the organization does not keep everything forever simply because deletion seems inconvenient. It also helps ensure that archiving and disposal occur with proper approval and documentation rather than through informal habit. Auditors are especially interested in lifecycle discipline because weak retention and disposal practices often reveal that the organization lacks a coherent understanding of why it holds certain information and how long that purpose remains valid. Access and usage rules are equally important because governance is not just about having the right data. It is also about making sure the right people use it in the right ways. A common mistake is assuming that once data exists inside the organization, broad internal access is automatically acceptable. In reality, good governance asks who needs the data, for what purpose, under what conditions, and with what restrictions on further sharing or modification. These questions matter not only for security, but also for privacy, compliance, ethics, and data quality. If too many people can change important records, accuracy may suffer. If data collected for one purpose is reused for another without oversight, trust may decline and obligations may be violated. A mature governance program therefore defines approved use, restricts access appropriately, and supports monitoring so misuse can be detected and addressed. Auditors care about this because uncontrolled use is often a sign that the enterprise sees data as available by default rather than governed by purpose and accountability. Data governance also plays a major role in system integration and enterprise consistency. Most organizations use many applications, and those systems often exchange information constantly. A customer record may begin in one platform, move into billing, appear in reporting, and later influence service, marketing, or compliance processes. If governance is weak, these movements can create duplicate records, inconsistent values, unclear sources, and confusion about which system should be trusted when differences appear. A governance program helps by identifying authoritative sources, defining how data should move, and clarifying which teams must coordinate when important structures or definitions change. This becomes especially valuable during mergers, modernization projects, cloud migration, and vendor transitions, when data can easily become fragmented across old and new environments. For the CISA learner, this is a reminder that governance supports architecture and operations as much as reporting. It helps the enterprise manage change without losing clarity about what data means, where it comes from, and who is responsible for its integrity. A strong data governance program also depends on policy, communication, and monitoring. The organization needs clear internal expectations about ownership, quality, classification, retention, access, and acceptable use. But those expectations must also be understood well enough to influence daily behavior. Employees, managers, analysts, and technical teams all need to know how governance affects their work, especially when they create new reports, modify system interfaces, or request access to sensitive information. Monitoring matters because management must be able to tell whether governance is actually operating or whether exceptions and inconsistencies are becoming normal behind the scenes. This may involve review processes, data quality checks, access oversight, issue escalation, and audit attention to areas where important information supports critical business activity. A common misconception is that data governance is mainly for large analytics teams or for executive discussions about strategy. In reality, it matters anywhere the organization depends on information being understandable, controlled, and reliable enough to support business operations and accountability. The larger picture should be much easier to see. A data governance program is the organized way an enterprise defines, owns, protects, uses, and oversees data so that information remains trustworthy and useful across systems, departments, and business decisions. Its fundamentals include clear ownership, practical stewardship, strong quality expectations, common definitions, sensible classification, lifecycle discipline, controlled access, and oversight that keeps governance connected to real operations. When those elements are present, the organization is far better positioned to support privacy, compliance, security, reporting, and effective management. When they are weak, confusion spreads quickly, and even well-intentioned teams can end up working from unreliable or poorly controlled information. For the CISA learner, that is the most important lesson. Data governance is not just paperwork around databases. It is a management discipline that helps the enterprise treat data as something valuable, accountable, and worthy of deliberate control from beginning to end.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.